The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant asphalt. It was the hour when light gives up without protest, no blaze of color, just a quiet fading from amber to ash. The highway had emptied, long shadows slipping across cracked pavement like ghosts moving west, and on the median, standing so still she could have been mistaken for a trick of the dusk, was the dog. Her paws were crusted with dry blood and grit, and the fur along her right flank bore a jagged mat of brambles. But she stood squarely, tail low, ears drawn back, not in fear, but listening. A German shepherd, though the weight on her bones was down to a kind of outline. She didn't flinch at the rush of a passing semi. She didn't blink when the dust from its wake coated her face. She just looked east. 30 yards behind her, a farm gate clanged shut, and a man cursed under his breath. His name was Wes Hanley, 71, barefoot on the gravel with a bowl of stew still steaming in his left hand. He hadn't seen the dog approach. 1 minute he'd been locking up the hen house. The next, she was there, outlined against the road like a memory. Not barking, not limping. Just there. Hell are you supposed to be? He muttered, squinting. He'd seen strays before. Farm country always had them. But this one wasn't begging or sniffing around for scraps. She wasn't panicked or wild-eyed. She was staring at his porch, at the rocking chair by the screen door, to be exact, as though it meant something to her. Wes lowered the stew and wiped his fingers on his jeans. Something in his gut twitched, like a warning he hadn't yet earned. She took one step forward, then another. Not a stalk too slow for that. More like someone approaching a grave they weren't sure was still there. The porch light flickered on. Behind him, automatic. He hadn't fixed the sensor, not in years. The bulb's yellow glow spilled over the steps, catching the matted fur on her chest and turning her pupils a deep, unnatural gold. She stopped at the edge of the gravel. One paw still lifted. Wes took a half step back. Instinctively, you lost, girl. No. No. Koya. Her ribs showed beneath the black hand-tan coat, but her eyes were alert, intelligent, searching. He didn't know how to explain it, but it was like she was comparing what she saw to something remembered, like she'd been here before or somewhere close enough. He crouched and set the bowl down gently, pushing it toward her with the back of his hand. She didn't move, not toward the food, not away. Her ears twitched at the clink of ceramic on stone, but her eyes stayed fixed on his. Steady, unreadable. I'm not the one you're looking for, girl, he murmured. That chair's been empty going on 5 years now. His voice caught, halfway through the sentence. Something he hadn't planned to say. She blinked once and lowered her paw to the gravel. Slowly she walked past the stew, around Wes as if he were a stump in the field, and climbed the porch steps. Her body moved like it remembered them, though they were uneven and cracked with time. When she reached the top, she paused beside the chair, sniffed, circled once, then sat, not like a begging dog, but like something keeping vigil. Wes stood there a long moment, not knowing if he should speak, or move, or just let it be. The air had gone still. The chickens were quiet in their coop. Even the cicadas had gone silent, and in that silence he realized his hands were shaking. I had a shepherd once, he said finally, a long time ago, but she didn't look at him. She was facing the door now, waiting. Inside the house, the sensor light flickered again. The bulb buzzed, then died. The next morning began with wind. It scraped dry across the porch boards and to rattle the loose edge of a sheet metal gutter Wes had meant to fix last winter. The dog was still there, hadn't moved from the chair's side, not even to eat the stew, which had congealed under the rim of the bowl and gathered a ring of ants. Her posture hadn't relaxed, but something had shifted in it. Her chin rested against the chair leg, and her breathing was shallower, slower. Not sleep, not peace. Something in between. Wes watched from inside. Unmoving, he held the chipped curtain back with 2 fingers, coffee untouched in his other hand. He didn't want to step outside just yet. The light had changed overnight. What had been a gold haze was now a sharp, overexposed clarity, blades of sunlight cutting through the slats, making even dust look like it was trying too hard to exist. By mid-morning, the dog stood, legs stiff and mouth slightly parted. She turned once, scanned the road, then padded to the far edge of the porch and dropped down again, closer to the screen door this time. Closer to him. Wes opened the door just wide enough to speak. You don't eat. You don't last long out here. She didn't respond, but her ears didn't pull back either, just the faint twitch of one brow muscle, as if the sound of his voice reached a place memory couldn't. He tried the stew again. Fresh this time, laid it on a patch of shade. Nothing. By late afternoon, her breathing grew uneven. Wes noticed it while he was hauling hay to the fence line. At first he thought the wind had picked up again, but then he realized it was her. A faint wheeze beneath the ribcage, sharp as split wood. She stood only once that hour and stumbled halfway through it. The stumble wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. Wes walked toward her then. Slow, measured steps, not reaching, not calling, just nearing her space the way he would with a foaling mare. No assumptions, no quick hands. He crouched a few feet from where she lay, not looking directly at her, just at the boards beneath them. There's a vet in town, he muttered. 20 miles if you're someone's. I figure they'd chipped you. A small fly landed on her nose. She didn't bother to shake it. He stood, walked to the truck, left the door open longer than necessary. The engine stuttered once before turning over, its sound foreign against the quiet fields. He didn't glance back at her until he was halfway down the drive, when the mirror caught something that pulled at him, a slow turn of her head, not toward him, but toward the horizon behind. She wasn't waiting for him. She was waiting for someone else. He turned the truck around. The clinic smelled like iodine and cheap floor cleaner. The receptionist glanced at him, then the dog. She yours? No. The vet didn't ask many questions, just did the scan. Examined the scabs along her ribs, the swelling near her hind leg, old wound, healed wrong, travel, stress, dehydration. A single cracked tooth. The chip came back registered New Mexico address. That was 120 miles southwest. Wes traced the distance on a map with the edge of his thumbnail. She didn't come here by accident. The vet said quietly. No. Wes replied. She didn't that night. Wes made space in the corner of the porch, laid out a folded top and an old army blanket that smelled faintly of mothballs and split cedar. She stepped onto it without hesitation, circled once, and rested her body with her back to the well where she could see the road again. Wes sat in the rocking chair beside her. He didn't speak. The breeze was softer now, not quite cool, the kind that moves leaves just enough to sound like someone whispering across a great distance. Wes listened, eyes half-lidded. Somewhere in the cornrows a fox barked twice and went silent, a memory, surfaced not sharp but full-bodied, like a scent from a place you never named. There had been another dog once, younger, not a shepherd, not even close, just a mutt that had followed Wes's wife through floodwater in '91, stayed with them until cancer took her, then wandered off one morning without ceremony. He hadn't thought of that dog in years, but now this one turned her head slightly, eyes reflecting the moonlight like she was measuring something. Not danger, not safety, just time. And for the first time she made a sound. It wasn't a whine. It wasn't a bark. It was a soft, broken, chuff-like breath forced through a closing throat. A sound that said nothing clearly but held everything in its shape. Wes froze. The chair creaked under his weight. And in that moment, he realized something. She wasn't just waiting for someone, she might be waiting to be recognized. The rain came thin and slow, more mist than storm, coating the porch steps in a fine sheen that made the wood glisten like old varnish. Wes didn't remember clouds in the forecast, but now the sky hung low, the gray thick enough to press against his shoulders as he opened the screen door and stood there, watching the dog. She hadn't moved from the chair. Her tail curled close, her breathing shallow. The angle of her body, that had changed slightly, and it took him a second to notice what was wrong. One hind leg was held off the ground, tucked under. Trembling, he didn't say anything, just stepped back inside, boots clunking on the warped boards. A minute later he returned with a flashlight, a faded towel, and the heavy silence of someone who no longer expected company. He knelt on the porch edge, a few feet from her. Rain tapped at the brim of his cap. She looked at him this time. Not afraid, not hopeful either. Just looking. Let me see it, he said, voice low. She didn't move. He leaned forward slowly and angled the beam of the flashlight along her flank. Her leg was worse than he'd realized, swollen above the paw, the fur clumped dark around a deep crescent wound. Not fresh, but not clean either. Possibly barbed wire, possibly something worse. The pads of her foot were cracked too, like overused leather. He turned off the light. You've been walking on that a while, haven't you? She blinked, slow and deliberate. Not a flinch, not a growl, but she didn't lay down either. She was holding position, as though breaking posture would betray something. Wes tossed the towel gently beside her. That'll do more for you than this old chair. The porch creaked under his weight as he eased himself down onto the first step. He didn't try to touch her, just sat there while the mist soaked into his coat and the wind made soft whistling sounds through the screen mesh. Behind him, inside, a clock ticked. Somewhere behind the hills, a coyote let out a thin, high call. The dog's ears twitched, but she didn't look away from the door. Still watching, still waiting. It was past midnight when the change came. She stood, not quickly. It took effort, every joint resisted her, but she rose, shook once, then turned and looked straight at him. There was something new in her eyes now. Not relief, not fear. Something closer to doubt. She limped forward 3 steps, then stopped. Her weight shifted. She wanted him to follow. Wes hesitated. His knees ached and his back hadn't forgiven him since April. But there was no mistaking the request, not a command, not begging, just invitation. He followed her down the steps, flashlight loose in one hand. She led him not toward the road, but around the back of the house. Past the dead lilac bush, past the overturned rain barrel, into the old shed, the one with the rusted hinges and mouse-nibbled top. He hadn't opened it in years. The dog stopped at the door and waited. Wes drew in a breath that felt like memory and lifted the latch. The flashlight beam caught dust in the air, a rake leaning against a stack of forgotten fencing. And there, in the far corner, something small moved at first. He thought it was a raccoon, but then the shape separated 2 shapes. Pup's young eyes open, but only just. Their coats held the same pattern as the shepherd's, though one was more tan than black, and the other was curled half under a scrap of feed sack. She stepped In behind him, lowered herself beside them, and nudged them gently with her nose. The injured leg barely held her weight, but she did it anyway. Not a sound passed from her mouth. Wes didn't speak either. There were no words for this, only the strange sensation of things shifting out from under what you thought you knew. She hadn't come for food, not for shelter. She hadn't come alone. And if he was honest with himself, she hadn't come to this place. She had come back to it. He scanned the shed, light flickering against the old feed crates and chicken wire, and then he saw it etched into the inside of the door. Faint, half-worn, a name carved by a pocket knife. H&L Wynot, Hanley. Henley. The spelling. His wife had never corrected in the county records. Wes stepped back slowly, the rain still whispering on the roof above. The shepherd watched him. No aggression, no gratitude, just the measured gaze of something judging whether or not the past could be trusted again. And in that moment, Wes realized something far more unsettling. This wasn't her first time here. The night passed without rain, but the dew came early. It gathered along the porch rail in glassy beads, clung to the tall grass where Wes hadn't mowed in weeks, and silvered the shepherd's fur where she lay beneath the old rocking chair. She hadn't moved, not even when the owls called from the sycamore grove or the coyote tracks appeared fresh in the dust beyond the fence line. She stayed curled tight, chin tucked in, one hind leg trembling now and then. Wes didn't sleep either. By dawn, the wind had shifted again, this time from the north. Colder. He opened the door softly, mug in hand, and she opened her eyes before the hinges creaked. No sound, no bark, just that slow blink again as if checking whether the world had changed overnight. He set the mug down and crouched beside her, studying her leg. The brambles had hidden more than he thought. The wound near her thigh was older than it looked, deep but half scabbed, possibly reopened by the long walk. Infection had started, he guessed, not fresh, but rising under the skin like a tide. Let me look. Girl, she didn't snap, didn't growl, but she didn't yield, either. When he reached out, she shifted just slightly enough to let him know she wouldn't stop him, but she wasn't ready to trust, not fully, so he left her, not out of pride, just out of knowing how long it takes some things to turn. He boiled water, ripped one of his old flannel shirts into strips, set them on the porch beside the door, just within reach, and then he left the door ajar. Around mid-morning she moved, not far, just enough to nose the bowl from last night closer to the edge of the porch, where the sun had begun to pool. She didn't eat, just smelled it, then rested her head beside it, eyes half-lidded in thought. Wes watched from the kitchen, elbows on the sink, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the stillness. By noon, the change came. A truck rolled up the drive, powder blue with a cracked windshield and an engine that coughed like an old smoker. Wes stepped out before the driver could honk you. Hanley. The man was heavyset, maybe mid-30s, wearing a county badge half-clipped to his belt and mud on his boots that hadn't dried from yesterday's rains. Depends what you're selling, Wes muttered. Not selling, just following tracks. Got word from the shelter in Dunley. Dog escaped night before last. Female shepherd walked out through a gate that wasn't latched right. Problem is, he glanced at the porch, then back at Wes. She's already cleared 2 counties. Wes said nothing. She was picked up last month near Hollow Pine. Real rough shape. No microchip, no ID. Spent most of her days in the back corner of the pen. Didn't eat unless it rained. Wes crossed his arms. She'll bite anyone. No. But she broke through a window to get out. Thought you'd seen her. Wes didn't nod. Didn't deny it, either. Behind him, the screen door creaked slightly in the breeze. She yours. Never seen her before yesterday. The man raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. After a moment, he turned back toward his truck. Let the shelter know she made it this far. They'll decide if it's worth another chase. The truck kicked up dust as it turned. Wes didn't watch it go. That evening, the shepherd came inside. No ceremony, no call. Wes had left the door open again and she slipped through it like a shadow, hesitant but deliberate. She didn't explore, just stopped at the rug near the fireplace and lay down with a groan that was half exhale. Her paw, now more swollen, twitched once, and she began licking the side with short, steady strokes. Wes knelt slowly. This time, she let him touch it. He cleaned it in silence, dipping the cloth into warm water, dabbing the edges where the skin that had cracked and darkened. She didn't flinch, even when it stung. Her breathing stayed even. Her eyes, those deep, heavy-lidded eyes, never left his face. The flannel strips made a poor bandage, but they were clean and dry, and she accepted them without complaint. When it was done, she laid her head across his knee for a moment, not seeking affection, just resting. Wes felt something tighten in his chest, not grief exactly, but its cousin, a kind of memory his body still held, though he couldn't name the shape of it anymore. Later that night, after the fire had burned low and the house had gone quiet again, he pulled out a box from the hall closet, dusty, buckled on one side. He hadn't opened it in 4 years. Inside were collars, 2 neatly coiled, and 1 torn photo creased across the middle. A young girl crouched beside a shepherd. Different dog, different life. He stared at it a long while, thumb tracing the edge where the girl's hand had once touched the dog's ear. The shepherd in the photo had the same steady eyes, same way of looking through, not at behind him. The dog stirred on the rug, then stood. She walked toward the box and sniffed it once. Then she looked up at him. Not recognition, not demand, just ... waiting. The dog did not touch the box again. After that first measured glance, she walked to the doorway and sat facing the empty porch, ears tilted toward the dark as if listening for a sound only she could hear. Wes stayed on the floor beside the fire, the torn photos still in his hand, the silence inside the house so complete it rang in his ears. Outside, the night was windless. Not still. There was always some movement in a place like this, but the kind of hush that happens just before a change, as though the land itself was holding its breath. By morning, she had moved Aganoni a few feet, but enough to show she was stronger. The bandage had shifted, tugged loose by her licking, and the swelling had gone down some. Wes didn't rewrap it. She didn't need fussing, she just needed stillness and time. He didn't speak much to her in those days. He kept the routine. Simple food placed near the hearth, water in a steel bowl, the porch door left open each evening and closed gently by midnight. She didn't follow him around the house. She stayed close, but separate, like a shadow that chose its own rhythm. The shelter never called, or if they did, Wes didn't answer. After that first visit from the county man, no one else came asking. The world, as it often does, moved on. Summer inched forward. The cottonwoods began to hum with cicadas. The hens returned to laying. The dog she still had no name began to wander farther across the field, sometimes disappearing past the second fence line before returning at dusk with burrs in her fur and a new kind of calm in her step. It was never clear what she'd come looking for, but she had found something, whether it was a place, a memory, or simply a place where a memory could settle down and grow quiet. Wes didn't try to claim her. Some mornings she'd be gone when he rose, not far, just out beyond the pasture, or down near the broken irrigation line. Other mornings she'd already be by the porch, tail flicking slightly as he opened the door, like she had never left, and once or twice she'd be gone all day until night brought her back. Paws dusty, eyes clear, as though the land itself had released her on loan. One afternoon, not long after the sunflowers began turning their heads toward autumn, Wes sat on the back steps with a cup of weak coffee and watched her, watching the horizon. A storm was forming in the far west, low clouds, purple-backed, dragging threads of shadow behind them. The air was warm but shifting, the kind of pressure that pulled birds to lower branches and made grasshoppers stall mid-leap. She didn't twitch, she didn't fidget. She simply stood there, the breeze lifting the edges of her coat, gaze pinned on the place where the hills dropped away into road and rock. There was no sign of tension in her shoulders, no sign of need. That evening Wes didn't come back. Wes didn't panic. He fed the hens, locked the tool shed, lit the porch lamp. He left the door open past midnight. Still, no sound. The next morning, the dew was heavy, and the trail through the wild grass was fresh. It curved gently from the porch, down past the bent windmill, and vanished over the slope. At the base of the hill, where the earth turned dry and cracked, a single pawprint remained, the others already scattered by the shifting grass. Wes stood there for a long time, staring down at the pressed dirt, the broken seed pods, the curl of one brittle leaf caught inside the imprint like a small gesture folded into a larger one. He didn't follow. There was no need. That afternoon, he opened the box again. This time he didn't take out the collars or the photo. He took out the piece of twine that had been looped around the last dog's feeding tag, worn smooth from rain and worry. He walked to the edge of the porch and tied it around the arm of the rocking chair. It fluttered once in the breeze, then hung still. The days after that were quieter. Not empty, but rebalanced. The kind of quiet that comes not from absence, but from something having been witnessed, accepted, and let go. Sometimes Wes would find himself glancing at the slope beyond the windmill, not expecting, just remembering, like the way a hand reaches unconsciously toward a scar that has long since healed. And sometimes late at night, when the wind moved through the trees just so, he would think of that first moment of the dog, standing on the highway like a figure formed from shadow and dust, looking east as though some small but certain gravity had drawn her here, not to stay, not to be kept, just to touch something one last time before continuing on. He never saw her again, but the twine stayed tied to the chair. And each evening, as the sun slipped behind the hill and the porch light flickered with its unreliable pulse, it would catch the dim glow for just a moment, one strand swaying gently in the air, as if stirred by a presence already gone.